The story begins with Jia, a successful and incredibly famous actress. The biggest reason behind her success is her beauty. She does everything possible to preserve it, following an extremely strict diet, undergoing regular skincare treatments, and hiring top makeup experts. Once she finishes preparing herself to perfection, she heads to the annual awards ceremony. We learn that she has a new rival, the actress Jin, who is less successful and less famous than her. They were once members of the same idol group, and although they still pretend to be close friends in public, they secretly can't stand each other. On the way to the ceremony, Jia's manager Do tells her he has something important to say, but only if she promises not to get angry, yell, or swear. She agrees and asks him what it is. He nervously explains that the event organizers have decided she will walk the red carpet before Jin. The moment Jia hears this, she completely forgets her promise. Her furious shouting and swearing are loud enough for everyone around them to hear. She knows exactly what this means. If she enters first, Jin will arrive afterward, stealing everyone's attention as the newest celebrity to appear. Jia immediately calls Kim, the head of her agency. Her success has made her so confident that even Kim is afraid to answer her calls whenever she's genuinely angry. She scolds him relentlessly, calling him incompetent for failing to protect her interests. Then she calmly announces that she'll handle the situation herself. Without changing her expression, Jia tells Do, who is driving, to crash into the car in front of them. Do laughs, convinced she's joking, but one look at her face tells him she's completely serious. Left with no choice, he fastens his seatbelt and deliberately crashes into the vehicle ahead. A short while later, someone approaches Jin with an apology, explaining that the ceremony schedule has changed. She will now enter before Jia because Jia has been involved in a car accident and might be late. Jin immediately realizes Jia orchestrated the entire incident. As soon as Jin arrives at the ceremony, reporters surround her, taking countless photos. Moments later, Jia rushes in and instantly steals the spotlight. Refusing to let that happen, Jin walks over, links her arm with Jia's as if they're still best friends, and enters alongside her, forcing the photographers to focus on both of them. Quietly, Jin tells Jia to keep pretending they're friends in front of the reporters, just like she's always done. The ceremony begins, and Jia and Jin are seated beside each other. Jin tells Jia that she hasn't changed at all. She's still selfish and only cares about herself. Jia replies that if she were truly selfish, she would never have stayed with the idol group until it disbanded, nor would she have shared the money and success she earned largely through her own popularity. Jin laughs, saying Jia is only fooling herself. Without the rest of the group, she never would have reached her current level of fame. But now, everything she's built is about to fall apart. She promises to prove who the truly talented actress is and who was only relying on her teammates. The moment Jin finishes speaking, the host announces that Jin has won an award for her performance in her latest film. When Jia returns home, she breaks down in tears. Jin was honored while she wasn't, and Jin's words have wounded her deeply. Meanwhile, Do and Kim sit nervously in her living room, terrified of what Jia might do next. Even so, they can't bring themselves to leave because it's raining outside, and Jia hates being alone whenever it rains. To their surprise, Jia calmly walks downstairs, saying she's hungry. She heads into the kitchen and prepares an incredible feast. It's revealed that she's an excellent cook. Strangely though, she only pours herself a cup of green tea to stay faithful to her strict diet. She tells Kim and Do to eat everything while she simply watches them. She's developed the habit of cooking for others and watching them enjoy the food so she can feel satisfied without breaking her diet. Afterward, Jia asks them for another favor. She wants their honest opinion about her acting. Is Jin really a better actress than she is? Although both men know Jin is more talented, they lie to spare Jia's feelings. Jia refuses to accept their answer and insists they tell her the truth. Finally, Do gathers the courage to speak. He explains that acting is about making the audience genuinely feel the emotions of the character. Jia, however, never forgets that she's a famous celebrity. To become a better actress, she needs to stop thinking about her fame whenever she's performing. That night, Jia can't stop thinking about his words. She remembers her painful childhood with the woman who raised her. She taught Jia that friendships and emotions didn't exist. The only thing that mattered was becoming a successful actress. If she failed, she would be sent back to the orphanage and abandoned once again. For now, we leave Jia behind and meet a talented psychologist named Yoon. He's highly respected in his profession. While sitting in his office, he sends Ujin a congratulatory message for winning her recent award. We learn that Ujin was actually his very first client, long before he became such a successful therapist. Before Ujin even reads his message, she already has his contact open, intending to call him herself. When she sees his text, she's genuinely happy and tells him she would have been disappointed if he hadn't reached out. Despite all the success she's achieved, Ujin has started struggling with her acting. Directors and fellow actors have begun noticing the decline. Kim suggests she visit a psychologist he knows, believing therapy will help her reconnect with her emotions and improve her performances. Jia immediately refuses, insisting she doesn't need therapy because she's not crazy. Kim patiently explains that therapy isn't only for people with mental illnesses. Knowing exactly how to persuade her, he tells her that Ujin has been seeing the same psychologist and that her acting improved dramatically because of him. The moment Jia hears that, she changes her mind and says she's ready to meet him as soon as possible. It's revealed that this psychologist is none other than Yoon. When Jia arrives at his office, Yoon is suddenly reminded of a painful memory from his childhood. He quickly regains his composure and invites her inside to begin the session. As he analyzes her personality, he explains that her overwhelming success has trapped her inside the confident, charismatic persona of a famous celebrity. According to him, this is a defensive response created by the painful experiences she endured in the past. Just as he's about to ask her about her difficult childhood, his office phone rings. Since therapy sessions are confidential, Yoon had already sent his secretary home, forcing him to answer the phone himself. At that exact moment, the power goes out, and the rain grows even heavier. Suddenly, Yoon hears Jia screaming and desperately calling for help. He rushes to open the office door, only to discover it's jammed shut. Without hesitation, he smashes the door open and runs inside. Jia is suffering a severe panic attack. She can barely breathe. Yoon calmly comforts her and helps her steady her breathing until she gradually calms down. Even then, Jia begins hallucinating. She mistakes Yoon for someone else and repeatedly apologizes for something that happened in the past. Moments later, she loses consciousness and her head collides with Yoon's. When she wakes up, she finds herself in the hospital. Oddly, she hears Yoon's voice speaking directly into her ear, even though he's actually sitting at the reception desk. After confirming that Jia is safe, Yoon heads to the restaurant owned by his closest friend, Kyung. Kyung tries placing ice on Yoon's shoulder, which was injured while breaking down the office door. Once Jia feels a little better, Kim takes her to a meeting with director Moon, one of Korea's most successful directors. Nearly every actor dreams of working with him, even in a supporting role. Before entering, Kim repeatedly reminds Jia to watch her language because Moon is extremely blunt. His honesty often comes across as downright rude. When they enter, they discover Ujin is already there. Moon's assistant accidentally scheduled both actresses at the same time. Moon doesn't bother being polite. He tells Jia he no longer has any intention of casting her because she's emotionally empty and, in his opinion, not a good actress at all. Jia lets out a sarcastic laugh, instantly forgetting Kim's warning. She verbally tears Moon apart, leaving him speechless. After finishing, she coldly tells him she never wanted to work with him anyway before walking out. Meanwhile, Yoon returns to his office, where his secretary rushes in with terrible news. One of Yoon's patients, Lee, has been arrested for stabbing the man who swindled her out of her money. The real problem isn't the stabbing, it's that Lee confesses she did it because her psychologist told her to take revenge on the person who deceived her, and she believed that was the best solution. Back at Jia's house, her phone rings. To her surprise, she's told that Moon has changed his mind and decided to cast her as the lead actress in his new film. As thrilled as Jia is, Ujin is consumed with jealousy and decides she's going to destroy Jia. The following day, Jia and Kim meet Moon to sign the contract. The moment the paperwork is complete, Jia discovers the entire country is talking about her. A video has leaked showing her screaming at and insulting her former assistant, Mi. Overnight, the public brands her a bully. Jia desperately insists the video isn't real because she has no memory of treating Mi that way. She admits she has a bad temper, but she's certain she never crossed that line with anyone. Unfortunately, her reputation is so poor that no one believes she's innocent. The leaked video throws her into one crisis after another. One day, she goes out to buy sparkling water as a substitute for alcohol, which she refuses to drink because she believes it would ruin her beauty. While standing near the supermarket, she suddenly hears Yoon's voice, saying he's responsible for everything, before repeatedly blaming himself. She looks around and sees Yoon sitting nearby, drinking heavily and barely conscious. The strange part is that she hears his voice clearly inside her head, even though his lips aren't moving. Without understanding why, Jia suddenly bursts into tears. She realizes the sadness overwhelming her doesn't belong to her. They're Yoon's emotions. She spends the entire night awake, trying to understand how she's suddenly able to hear Yoon's thoughts and feel his emotions. When Yoon wakes up the next morning, he finds himself back at home. Kyung has already prepared breakfast for him. Yoon has no idea how he got home. Before Kyung can say anything, Song, Yoon's sister, passes by in her wheelchair. It's revealed that she's paralyzed. Song has an extremely sharp tongue. She complains that she's repeatedly told Yoon not to bring his friends into the house. After she leaves, Kyung remarks that Song hasn't changed at all. As they sit down to eat, Kyung explains what happened the previous night. Whenever Yoon drinks too much, he passes out completely. Jia became worried about him and stayed by his side. During that time, Kyung had been calling Yoon repeatedly. Jia answered the phone instead, told Kyung where they were, and asked him to come pick Yoon up because he was too drunk to take care of himself. When Kyung arrived, he found Jia still sitting beside Yoon. She could have left at any moment, but she stayed to make sure nothing happened to him. Because of the scandals surrounding Jia, her phone suddenly stops ringing. Then, she receives a text from Do. He says he couldn't bring himself to tell her the news in person. Kim wants her to move out of her apartment by the end of the week and find somewhere else to live. Jia begins searching for a new home. Eventually, she finds a house she likes and decides to buy her very first home in her own name. But Yoon, the day Jia is supposed to receive her new house, she arrives to find several other people gathered outside. Every one of them insists the house belongs to them because they bought it too. Jia soon realizes she's been scammed, just like the others. She transferred the entire payment to the real estate broker without even signing the contract. That night, Yoon visits the police station to learn every detail about Lee's case. He takes advantage of the fact that one of the officers used to be his client, whom he had helped overcome alcohol addiction. Coincidentally, Jia is at the same police station because of the housing scam. When Yoon discovers she's there, he wants to find out why and help her, hoping to repay her for staying by his side when he was drunk. Meanwhile, a young woman secretly takes pictures of Jia without her permission. Jia politely asks for her phone so she can delete the photo, but the woman yells that Jia has no right to take someone else's phone. She starts accusing Jia of being exactly what everyone says she is, a bully and a terrible person. Her words cut deeply, and Jia quietly returns to her seat without saying another word. The woman then opens the photo on her phone and writes a caption saying Jia looks awful in real life and that she's much prettier than the famous actress. Before she can post it online, Yoon steps in and takes her phone. He calmly tells her that he could have her arrested for violating the privacy rights of a famous actress. The compensation she would be forced to pay would likely ruin her financially and could even land her in jail. After teaching her a lesson, Yoon waits for Jia outside the police station. As they leave together, they walk in silence. Eventually, Yoon thinks to himself that Jia must be devastated after being scammed. Since Jia can hear his thoughts, she answers out loud, telling him it's the first time she's ever been deceived like this. But she'll be fine, so he doesn't need to worry about her. The moment she finishes speaking, her ankle twists and she falls to the ground. Yoon rushes over and asks if she's all right. Jia finally breaks. She admits she's not okay at all and bursts into tears in his arms. Yoon gently comforts her. The next morning, Yoon gets Hyol ready to take her to daycare. Hyol is actually Song's niece, but she calls Yoon dad. As Yoon leaves the house with Hyol, he accidentally bumps into Jia. That's when he discovers, by pure coincidence, that Jia is his new neighbor and has moved into the house directly across from his. Just then, Hyol calls Yoon dad again and reminds him she'll be late for daycare. Jia is completely shocked. Yoon never looked like a married man with a child. For reasons she can't explain, she feels a sharp pang of disappointment. That evening, when Yoon returns home, he finds Jia standing outside her house. Shivering, she tells him the heating system in her home is broken. Yoon invites her inside so she can warm up. While they're sitting together, Hyol comes over and says she's hungry and wants curry. Yoon cooks it for her, but the moment Hyol tastes it, she starts crying because it's terrible. Jia smiles and says she'd like to show them her cooking skills. She heads into the kitchen and soon returns with 2 bowls of curry. The moment Yoon and Hyol taste it, they're amazed. Yoon asks how she's become such an incredible cook when she barely eats anything herself. Jia explains that she loves watching people enjoy the food she makes because it gives her the feeling of being full. Seeing others eat happily brings her genuine joy. While they're eating, Song passes by. Yoon introduces Jia as their new neighbor. Song's face immediately hardens. Yoon's attitude changes instantly. He apologizes to Jia and asks her to leave. Jia walks out, completely confused about why he invited her inside, only to throw her out moments later. Afterward, Yoon goes to see Song. She asks why Jia was inside their house. He explains that Jia's heating system isn't working, so she only came over to warm up for a while. Song refuses to believe it's a coincidence. She insists Jia's curse is following them and begs Yoon to sell the house and move as soon as possible because she can't bear seeing Jia every day. Yoon tells her she has to let go of the past because no one should still be blamed for what happened. Song breaks down. She cries that Jia is responsible for every terrible thing that's happened to them. Because of Jia, she's now confined to a wheelchair. Tired of having the same argument again, Yoon tells her he'll visit a real estate office and put their house up for sale. The following day, Jia receives even more compensation claims from the court. Her debts continue to pile up. Kim has abandoned her and officially terminated her contract with the agency. Jia goes to confront him and asks why he's treating her this way. Kim coldly tells her he has no intention of staying responsible for a failed actress whose career is ending. Taking advantage of the strained relationship between Jia and her mother, he tells Jia to call her and ask her to pay off the debts. After all, the money Jia's mother used to move to America originally belonged to Jia. When Jia turns around, she sees Ujin entering the office with Do and Jia's former stylist. Kim proudly announces that Ujin is now the agency's biggest star and has taken Jia's place. Even Do has become Ujin's manager. Jia realizes she's been betrayed by the people she trusted most. She tells them they'll soon remember exactly who Jia is before walking away completely devastated. Meanwhile, Yoon visits the hospital to meet the con artist whom Lee stabbed. The man refuses to settle the case or reduce Lee's prison sentence. However, Yoon quickly changes his mind. He tells the scammer that he was the one who encouraged Lee to stab him as revenge. Since the man has already swindled 13 other victims besides Lee, Yoon points out that if he persuades every one of them to seek revenge the same way, the scammer won't stand a chance of escaping them. For his own safety, accepting the settlement is clearly the smarter choice. The scammer immediately agrees. Later, Lee finally agrees to meet Yoon during visiting hours. She thanks him for working so hard to help someone like her. Instead of responding with pride, Yoon bursts into tears. He repeatedly apologizes, insisting that everything happened because of him. Soon afterward, Yoon is summoned before the National Association of Psychologists for an investigation. They're examining whether he encouraged a patient to take revenge, which could be considered incitement to murder. Yoon explains that he's used this therapeutic method with many patients before, and Lee is the only one who interpreted revenge as killing someone. The association isn't convinced. They suspend him from practicing for 3 months while deciding what disciplinary action to take. As soon as the hearing ends, Hyol's nanny calls him in a panic. Song is having a severe emotional breakdown and needs help immediately. Meanwhile, Jia finds a package outside her house that was mistakenly delivered to Yoon's address. At that moment, she sees Yoon running home in a panic, rushing past her as if he doesn't even notice she's there. When Yoon enters the house, he finds Hyol crying, while Song screams uncontrollably and smashes everything around her. He rushes over, trying to calm her down. Song blames him for everything. She screams that she wishes he had been the one taken instead of her. Jia has quietly followed them inside. She hears every word. She also sees Yoon apologizing to Song, telling her she should be right, that he should have been the one in her place. He silently accepts all of her anger. But through their strange connection, Jia hears what Yoon is truly thinking. He's desperately begging Song to stop because he's already carrying more pain than anyone knows. Jia also feels the crushing despair buried deep inside him. Tears fill her eyes. She never imagined Yoon was an actor as skilled as she was, someone capable of hiding his true emotions behind a perfectly calm face. Yoon stays beside Song until she finally calms down and falls asleep. The next morning, Jia greets him outside the house. He gives her a quick greeting and immediately walks away. Jia senses his emotions and realizes he's deliberately trying to avoid her. Meanwhile, a screenwriter named Oh wants to help Jia because Jia was the very first actress who believed in her and agreed to appear in her first film. Oh offers Jia a supporting role in her new movie and arranges an audition with the director. Jia performs the assigned scene beautifully. The reason her acting has improved is Yoon. After experiencing his emotions the previous night, she finally understands what genuine acting truly is. The director is so impressed that he decides to give her a much bigger role than originally planned. After leaving the meeting with Oh and the director, Jia runs into Do. Ujin also happens to have a meeting at the same place. Jia immediately pushes Do away. Ujin asks what Jia is doing there, especially since no agency is willing to sign her anymore. By coincidence, Yoon is standing behind Ujin. Jia suddenly runs over, grabs Yoon's arm, and tells Ujin to congratulate her because Yoon is now her new manager. Ujin is visibly embarrassed. She greets Yoon, mentioning that it's been a long time since they last met. Jia finally realizes that Yoon used to be Ujin's psychologist. Yoon then invites both Jia and Ujin to a nearby cafe. As they sit together, Ujin explains that after their idol group disbanded, she fell into severe depression. She sought therapy because she had no idea what she was supposed to do with her life. While they're talking, a reporter named Han approaches Jia and asks for a quick interview. Jia politely refuses and gets up to leave. Han follows her anyway, recording the entire encounter without permission. He repeatedly questions her about the bullying scandal, aggressively pressures her for answers, and even grabs her arm. Yoon immediately steps in. He pulls Han away, takes his phone, and tells him to apologize and leave before he ends up facing legal consequences. Han angrily demands to know who he thinks he is. Without hesitation, Yoon replies, "I'm Jia's manager." That night, Jia can't stop thinking about what Yoon did for her. She also feels bothered by the fact that she believes he's married with a child. By now, she's almost certain she's fallen in love with him. The following evening, Jia visits Yoon. She tells him she knows her acting career is close to ending. Then she admits that he's the only person who can help her become successful again. She wants him to let her borrow his emotions so she can use them in her acting. Yoon stares at her in confusion. Jia explains everything. She tells him she can hear his thoughts and feel his emotions. After researching it online, she found something called emotional transference. But what she's experiencing goes far beyond any psychological theory. Yoon asks if she can really tell what he's thinking at that exact moment. Jia closes her eyes and concentrates. Then she says he's thinking she's crazy. That is exactly what was going through his mind. Even if she's telling the truth, Yoon refuses her request. He says he has no desire to spend his life beside someone who can constantly see his innermost feelings. To him, that would be the ultimate invasion of privacy. After becoming irritated, he leaves. The next day, Hyol is left alone at the playground while it rains. No one comes to pick her up because her nanny accidentally falls asleep. At the same time, Yoon is at the Psychology Association trying to reduce his suspension. By chance, Jia passes by the playground. She notices Hyol walking alone through the rain. Crying, Jia rushes over and asks why she's by herself. Hyol sadly says no one loves her because everyone forgot about her and nobody came to pick her up. Jia takes her home and cooks lunch for her. The delicious meal quickly cheers Hyol up. Hyol then asks Jia why she doesn't live with her mother and father. Jia quietly replies that she never had a father, even when she was little. Hyol smiles sadly and says she doesn't have a father either. Jia is stunned. She asks, "Then who is Yoon?" Hyol leans closer and whispers that it's a secret she'll only tell Jia. She reveals that Yoon isn't her father, he's actually her uncle. Jia is overwhelmed with relief. Meanwhile, Yoon, Song, and Kyung have been desperately searching everywhere for Hyol. Finally, Jia walks outside carrying the little girl, who has peacefully fallen asleep in her arms. Yoon carries the sleeping Hyol on his shoulder. Yoon snaps at her, saying she should have told them Hyol was with her. This time, his anger is far harsher than usual. Jia calmly replies that she simply happened to see Hyol crying alone in the rain. If they had really been that worried, they wouldn't have forgotten her in the first place. With that, she turns around and goes inside her house. After calming down, Kyung tells Yoon that he was wrong and that the respectful thing to do is apologize for the way he treated her. Yoon agrees and goes to Jia's house. Suddenly, it starts raining. He immediately remembers how Jia reacts whenever it rains and repeatedly knocks on her door. She doesn't answer. Growing anxious, he asks for help, and together they force the door open. Inside, they find Jia lying unconscious on the floor beside an opened bottle of pills. Yoon immediately assumes she tried to take her own life and rushes her to the hospital. In reality, the pills are diet supplements. Combined with her already extreme diet, her body simply couldn't handle them, causing her to faint. When Jia wakes up in the hospital, she finds Yoon sitting beside her. She reads his thoughts and hears him blaming himself, believing he's responsible for everything that's happened to her. He regrets refusing to help her return to her successful life. Sensing his guilt, Jia pretends she really did try to end her life because she's exhausted by everything happening around her. Unfortunately for her, she's still a terrible liar. Yoon instantly realizes she's acting. He asks what he is thinking right now. Jia focuses for a moment before answering that he's thinking she was trying to fool him. She is exactly right. At that moment, Yoon finally accepts that the emotional transference is real. Without another word, he leaves. The next day, he passes Jia's house and finds Do waiting outside. Yoon asks what he's doing there. Do explains that Jia blocked his number, and he desperately needs Yoon's help. A management company wants Jia to sign a contract. The problem is that the company's owner is a notorious man accused of sexual harassment, embezzlement, and physically abusing actresses under his agency. It's revealed that Woojin was the one who arranged this meeting because she wants to destroy Jia's last chance of returning to the entertainment industry. The moment Yoon learns the company's location, he rushes there. He arrives just in time, tears up the contract before Jia can sign it, and announces that he's willing to become her manager himself. Jia immediately signs a contract with him instead. However, Yoon has two conditions. First, Song must never find out about their agreement. Second, the contract will last only 3 months. After that, they'll go their separate ways. From that day on, Jia and Yoon spend nearly all their time together, practicing and studying the emotional transference. They discover that if they're more than 50 meters apart, Jia can no longer hear Yoon's thoughts. Sometime later, Jia attends another audition for Oh's film. This time, the producer is present and has the final decision. While Jia performs inside, Yoon waits outside with the script, reading every line while immersing himself completely in the character's emotions. Through their connection, Jia receives those emotions. A little later, she comes out smiling and tells Yoon she completely impressed the producer. The role is officially hers. Soon afterward, Jia has a special promotional photo shoot. She can hardly believe she's finally been given a second chance. One day, while discussing a screenplay together, Jia asks Yoon how he understands people's emotions so well. He tells her that besides studying psychology, he inherited that ability from his father, who always cared deeply about other people's feelings. Jia suddenly senses overwhelming sadness inside him. She quietly asks if his father passed away. Yoon nods. He died in an accident, and according to Yoon, it happened because of him. He tells Jia that when he was in elementary school, he entered his father's room out of curiosity and took his father's asthma inhaler to play with it. The next morning, his father couldn't find it. Because of that, Song had to miss school so she could take Yoon and deliver the inhaler to their father's filming location. Their father was working on a movie set. While they were there, a terrible accident occurred. A little girl was about to die. Without hesitation, Yoon's father rushed forward to save her. At that moment, Yoon ran toward his father to return the inhaler. Because of everything happening at once, Song became caught in the accident and was left permanently paralyzed. Yoon believes that if he had never taken the inhaler in the first place, his father might have survived, and Song would never have been confined to a wheelchair. Feeling the pain buried inside him, Jia begins crying. Yoon apologizes and tries to leave because he doesn't want to burden her with his sorrow. Instead, Jia steps forward and hugs him tightly, gently patting his back. Yoon wipes away her tears while looking into her eyes. Jia then reveals a secret. Whenever they look directly into each other's eyes, the emotional transference stops. She tells him this so he'll know what she's about to say comes entirely from her own feelings. Then, she confesses. She loves him. Yoon becomes so flustered that he immediately walks away. Jia spends the entire night unable to sleep from embarrassment. The following morning, as they head to the filming set, something unexpected happens. Yoon begins hearing Jia's thoughts. He starts feeling her emotions. The emotional transference has completely reversed. Jia notices because she can no longer sense his feelings. Without access to his emotions, her acting falls apart. The director forces her to repeat the same scene 30 times. Finally, someone calls the director away because the producer wants to see him. Yoon approaches Jia and tells her that he's now the one reading her thoughts. Neither of them understands how their connection reversed. Then, an even bigger disaster strikes. Jia is removed from the project. The director apologizes, explaining that another damaging article about her has been published, causing another public uproar. The producer refuses to work with her. It's revealed that the reporter Han is behind the article. He simply refuses to leave Jia alone. Jia walks away heartbroken. Through the reversed emotional transference, Yoon feels her crushing loneliness. He experiences her belief that the whole world hates her. Meanwhile, Do returns to help solve Jia's problems. He truly regrets what happened and never intended to betray her. After discussing everything, Do and Yoon conclude that the key to clearing Jia's name is finding Mi. She's the only person who can prove Jia's innocence. The problem is that Mi disappeared after the incident. When Yoon tells Kyung about everything, Kyung suggests another possibility. Maybe the leaked video wasn't real at all. Perhaps Jia and me were simply rehearsing a scene together. The idea makes perfect sense, and Yoon begins believing it. The following day, Hyol goes alone to the playground. She's sad because every other child is there with their parents, while she's all by herself. Jia happens to see her. Several children are bullying Hyol, mocking her because she doesn't have a mother or a father. The moment Jia approaches, Hyol proudly points at her and announces, "That's my mom." Without hesitation, Jia plays along. She walks over and asks the children who dared to upset her precious daughter. Later, when they're alone, Hyol quietly admits she hates her mother. Jia gently tells her that's not true. Some mothers may fail their children, but no child truly hates their mother. She tells Hyol they're actually alike in many ways. As usual, Jia takes her home and cooks for her. When Yoon finds them together, Jia tells Hyol she suddenly has something important to do and postpones spending more time with her. Then she quickly runs home. Yoon tells Hyol to go back to the house before chasing after Jia. She's desperately trying to avoid him, so he won't read her thoughts or feel her emotions. Yoon catches up to her. He tells her she's actually being selfish. He willingly allowed her to see his emotions, yet she's unwilling to let him see hers. He walks into her house and practically forces his way inside. Then, he asks her to cook something so he can eat in front of her, knowing that watching people enjoy her food makes her happy. As Yoon reads her thoughts, he realizes just how kind-hearted she truly is. He becomes determined to help her however he can. That night, he stays awake searching for a way to repair her public image. With help from Kyung and Haeol, he comes up with a plan. Jia will quietly provide medical aid and charitable support to people in need, while allowing the press to cover her good deeds. Yoon also asks a journalist, one of his former patients, whom he helped recover from severe depression, for assistance. The journalist gladly agrees to help both Yoon and Jia. Within days, public opinion toward Jia begins improving. But Yoon doesn't stop there. He also asks director Moon for help. It's revealed that Moon deeply respects Yoon because Yoon was his son's psychologist and helped him overcome his extreme social withdrawal. Moon already feels guilty about everything Jia has gone through. He agrees to cast her in a supporting role in his next film. Ironically, Woojin is the lead actress. When Yoon tells Jia the news, she's disappointed. She doesn't want to play a supporting role beneath Woojin. Yoon tells her he completely understands how painful that is, but if she wants to rebuild her career, she has to endure it. Jia finally agrees. However, she reminds him that the emotional transference is still reversed. The two of them sit down and carefully analyze everything, trying to figure out what caused the reversal. Eventually, they reach one conclusion. It happened after Jia confessed her love, so Jia tries confessing again. Although Yoon blushes just as much as before, this confession doesn't carry the same overwhelming emotions. No matter how many times they try, nothing changes. Jia grows increasingly anxious because filming begins the next day. Yoon tells her to relax and walks to the refrigerator to get her a bottle of sparkling water. Just then, her phone rings. Through the emotional connection, Yoon suddenly hears Jia's thoughts, begging the caller to leave her alone. He feels overwhelming fear and sadness coming from her. Looking at the phone, he realizes the caller is Jia's mother. Yoon gently hugs her and encourages her to tell him everything about her. Jia finally opens up. She says her mother was so irresponsible that she never even cared to find out who Jia's father was. For 7 years, Jia was passed from one relative's house to another until her mother suddenly abandoned her at an orphanage. After leaving her there for a while, her mother would come back and take her out. But each time, it was only because child actors were needed for auditions. Once Jia's mother realized acting could make money, she decided to exploit her daughter and turn her into a famous actress. She constantly threatened that if Jia failed, she'd be sent back to the orphanage. The manipulation worked. As Jia became successful, her mother collected enormous amounts of money from her contracts until she became wealthy enough to move to America. Jia believes her mother is calling now, only to punish her for everything that's happened recently. Yoon gently tells her that no one will ever hurt her again. He'll stay by her side. He'll protect her. By this point, the emotions between them become so sincere that the emotional transference reverses once more, returning to its original state. The next day, Jia attends another audition. Both Moon and Kim are stunned. They can hardly believe this is the same Jia they once knew. She delivers an outstanding performance and wins the role. That evening, Yoon Yoon and Kyung organize a small celebration for her success. As they're returning home, Song sees Jia and Yoon together. She becomes deeply upset. Yoon follows her inside. Song tells him that she wants to move away as soon as possible because buyers are already interested in the house. Yoon is devastated. He begs her to wait just 3 more months. After that, they'll leave. Because of this promise, Yoon begins creating emotional distance between himself and Jia. He hopes that when the 3 months are over, separating from each other won't hurt as much. Filming finally begins. Jia amazes everyone with her performance. Her acting is so impressive that it nearly overshadows Woojin. But Yoon is only fooling himself. His eyes reveal exactly how he feels whenever he looks at Jia. Jia smiles at him and quietly says that this time, she won't be fooled by his acting anymore, and begs Yoon to stop being so cold toward her. She tells him she already feels rejected by everyone around her, and if he makes her feel the same way, she will have no one left to rely on. Soon afterward, Yoon receives a letter informing him that his suspension has been lifted. After reviewing his case, the association has decided to reinstate him. The next day, Jia is scheduled to film the most important scene in the movie, her very first scene, opposite Jin. Before filming begins, Yoon stays beside her, reassuring her because he knows how nervous she is. Just then, he receives a call. Someone has finally located me, whom he has been searching for a long time. He tells Jia that he has found her and needs to leave immediately. If he doesn't return in time, she'll have to rely on herself. He reminds her that she's a talented actress and can't keep depending on him forever. Yoon rushes to the place where Mi was supposed to be, but she has already left before he arrives. When he returns, Jia has already started filming with Jin. She performs the scene so brilliantly that Moon and the entire production crew applaud her. At that moment, Yoon realizes Jia is finally ready to stand on her own. He decides that it's time to terminate their contract. Unfortunately, Jia hears his thoughts. Her pride in herself instantly turns into heartbreak, and she suddenly collapses. When she wakes up, she's in the hospital with Yoon sitting beside her. She grabs his arm and begs him not to leave her. He gently comforts her and stays by her side. Later, Yoon visits Kyung, who has managed to obtain the script Jia had been rehearsing. He discovers that it contains the exact dialogue she performed with Mi. Before revealing everything, however, Yoon wants to know who was truly responsible for hurting Jia. Do uncovers the truth and tells Yoon that Jin orchestrated everything. She paid Mi to accuse Jia of bullying before disappearing. Jia accidentally overhears the conversation. Furious, she marches straight to Jin and slaps her across the face. Ironically, Jin had been rehearsing a scene at that exact moment, and her assistant was recording it, making Jia appear like the aggressor. Kim then takes the video to Moon, claiming Jin was assaulted during filming and insisting that Jia must be punished. As a result, Moon suspends Jia from filming until he can investigate what really happened. When Yoon returns to Jia's house, he finds her crying. She tells him to leave too, because everyone always abandons her. Even he wants to terminate their contract and walk away. She hears his thoughts admitting that leaving her is painful for him as well, but he believes he has no choice. Jia bursts into tears, hugs him tightly, and begs him not to leave. The next day, Yoon finally meets Mi at her mother's grave. He introduces himself as Jia's manager and asks to speak with her. Mi doesn't try to lie. She admits she made a terrible mistake by accepting Kim and Jin's offer. They promise to help pay for her mother's treatment if she cooperated. She also reveals that Kim was the one who leaked the surveillance footage that ruined Jia's reputation. Kim had planned for Jin to become his new puppet after failing to control Jia. Armed with the truth, Yoon visits the reporter Han. This time, he tells Han that he's there to make him correct the damage he caused. He hands him solid evidence, proving that Kim was behind everything that happened to Jia. As a result, Kim's agency is destroyed. His projects collapse. Jin terminates her contract with him, and multiple lawsuits are filed against him for compensation. Mi also posts the entire truth online. She explains that although Jia could be hot-tempered and arrogant, she genuinely cared about her and treated her like a close friend. The so-called bullying video was actually part of Jia's rehearsal for her new role. Her convincing performance only proved how talented an actress she truly was. Mi apologizes for staying silent for so long. When Jia reads everything, she breaks down in tears. She hugs Yoon and thanks him for believing in her and helping expose the truth. Yoon smiles and tells her that if she truly wants to thank him, he has one request. He asks her to spend an entire day with him. No work, no pressure, just the two of them. She happily agrees. During their date, Jia teases him, saying he should have simply admitted he wanted to spend time with her. She holds out her hand, inviting him to take it. Yoon gently holds her hand, and they spend the entire day together, sharing genuine feelings of love. Even then, neither of them confesses. The following day, Do returns to Jia and tells her that he's officially her manager once again. Jia immediately tries to contact Yoon, but can't reach him. She learns from Song that he has moved out as well. Meanwhile, Jia begins receiving numerous interview requests about the injustice she suffered. Yet she keeps trying to contact Yoon. Even Kyung doesn't know where he is. In reality, Yoon only answers Kyung's calls. Kyung constantly asks where he is because Jia is deeply worried about him. Yoon insists that everything he's doing is for Jia's own good. Every day, Jia sends him messages telling him she misses him and begging him to come back. She promises she'll forgive him if he returns. Hearing her crying voice is unbearably painful for Yoon, but he still can't tell her the real reason he's staying away, even though he loves her. One day, Do sends Yoon a message claiming Jia has been injured on the filming set. Yoon rushes to the hospital, only to discover she's perfectly fine. He realizes Do tricked him on Jia's behalf to bring him back. Jia throws her arms around him, crying as she calls him heartless. After she calms down, they go to a cafe to talk. Yoon tells her he had been staying at a fishing retreat. Still, he refuses to change his mind. He explains that he can't continue living as her manager, carrying all her responsibilities and emotions. He chooses to leave so he can finally live his own life away from all the pressure. Jia tells him she knows every word he's saying is a lie. Anne replies that her ability to read his thoughts is exactly why he can't bear staying beside her anymore. Then he walks away, completely heartbroken. That same day, Jia is alone in her dressing room at the filming location when heavy rain begins. At the same time, the power goes out, and when she tries to leave, the door jams shut. With every nightmare happening at once, terror overwhelms her. The fear unlocks a forgotten memory from her childhood. She finally remembers that Yoon's father had been responsible for looking after her on a filming set when she was a child. She was supposed to perform a dangerous scene, but an accident occurred. Yoon's father died while saving her. She realizes this because she had previously seen his photograph inside Yoon's house. Jia completely breaks down, finally understanding why Yoon had kept pushing her away. Eventually, Do and the maintenance workers force the door open and rescue her. The following night, when Yoon returns home, he finds Jia waiting for him. Crying, she apologizes and tries to tell him everything she remembered. Before she can finish, a car pulls up. Jia's mother steps out. Jia takes her inside and tells her that she remembers the truth, that her mother wasn't the one who saved her during the accident, despite what she had always claimed. Jia's mother puts on an incredible performance. She bursts into tears and says she lied because her daughter wouldn't have been able to bear the truth that someone died because of her selfishness. She tells Jia that she insisted Yoon filming the dangerous scene and put everyone around her in danger. Her manipulation works, and she successfully fills Jia with guilt. After returning to Korea, Jia's mother once again takes control of Jia's life, career, and acting offers. She even visits Yoon and orders him to stay away from her daughter, declaring that she's now Jia's manager. When Yoon insists that he'll stay by Jia's side, Jia's mother laughs. She calls him just as foolish as his father, who risked his life for Jia and died. She warns him to stay away if he truly cares about Jia. Because of her mother, Jia falls back into the lonely life she had escaped. Then, one day, she suddenly disappears. Do and Yoon discover she's missing, but no one knows where she went. Terrified, Yoon searches everywhere, but can't find her. The news reports begin covering Jia's disappearance, suggesting the pressure she endured finally became too much. However, before disappearing, Jia had secretly visited Song. She confessed that she now understood why Song hated her so much, and apologized for everything that happened to Song and her father. Song remains calm and tells Jia she'll forgive her on one condition: she must stay away from Yoon, because they can never be together. Now Yoon experiences the same nightmare Jia once endured when he disappeared. He feels the loneliness, fear, and despair she had suffered. Eventually, Kyung calls him and says Jia might be hiding in the very place where Yoon himself had once disappeared. Yoon rushes there. He finds Jia exactly where Kyung said she would be. The moment he sees her, he tells her how much he missed her. He embraces her tightly, crying as he apologizes for everything he put her through. He comforts her and promises that from now on, he'll stay by her side no matter what happens. Encouraged by his words, Jia confronts her mother and officially terminates their contract. She reveals that she remembers everything. Her mother had forced her to perform the dangerous scene simply because she wanted the money. Jia then plays a recording Kim had secretly sent her. In it, her mother's voice reveals that she and Kim planned everything together to destroy Jia's career so they could rebuild it from scratch under their complete control. After leaving her mother, Jia collapses into Yoon's arms, sobbing after discovering the truth about everything her mother had done to her. The next day, Jia takes Yoon somewhere she considers deeply important. He's shocked when he realizes they've arrived at his father's grave. Jia tearfully apologizes to Yoon's father for taking so long to come. Yoon asks when she remembered everything. She explains that she'd forgotten it all because of the trauma, but the memories returned during the last rainstorm, when overwhelming fear brought everything back. Jia asks him why he never hated her. Why did he stay by her side and help her after everything she had caused? Yoon gently tells her that none of it was anyone's fault. Nothing could have prevented the accident. He asks her to let go of her guilt because she was only a child, and his father would never have wanted her to spend her entire life blaming herself after he sacrificed his own to save her. Jia quietly says they probably can never be together. Before leaving, she thanks him for staying beside her and teaching her what love truly means. Yoon thanks her for entering his life and teaching him how to smile without pretending. Finally, he confesses that he loves her too. 1 year later, Jia has fully regained her fame, an enormous success. Yoon watches the news about her with a proud smile. He has also returned to work and advanced so much in his career that he's now giving lectures about human emotions. Song has finally overcome her trauma. Her relationship with herself and with her daughter has greatly improved. With Kyung's support, she opens her own art gallery. Her remarkable talent as a painter allows her to transform all the anger she once carried into beautiful works of art that people travel specifically to see. One day, Yoon visits his sister. He's delighted by everything she has achieved. To his surprise, Song apologizes for how she treated him. She admits she was a coward who blamed him for everything simply because it made her own pain easier to bear. She encourages him to live the life he truly wants and to follow his own heart. The next day, Yoon visits his father's grave on his Memorial Day. Jia arrives there as well. They stand frozen, staring at each other in shock. Then, Yoon deliberately lets Jia read his thoughts. She hears him confess that he missed her terribly and that this time, he will never let her leave him again. They both smile warmly. Yoon has finally accepted what he once believed was a curse, and instead of fearing it, he chooses to embrace it with Jia. And with that, the series ends.